The Silent Watchers. The Zeltharan Empire had ruled the galaxy for 6 centuries without question. Their fleets moved through space like silver shadows, beautiful and deadly. They had conquered 400 star systems and absorbed 200 alien civilizations into their domain. Some had joined willingly, seduced by promises of peace and prosperity. Others had resisted and been crushed beneath the weight of Zeltharan military might. Either way, the result was always the same. The Zeltharan Empire grew larger, and resistance became nothing more than a footnote in history. Supreme Commander Vexenar stood in the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and gazed at the stars with the satisfaction of someone who owned them. His species had evolved on a world called Zelthar Prime, a paradise of gentle rains and warm sunlight. The Zeltharans were tall and graceful, with crystalline skin that reflected light in patterns of blue and silver. Their eyes were large and multifaceted, capable of seeing across a broader spectrum than most species. Their hands had 6 delicate fingers, perfect for the precise work of building their advanced technology. They were beautiful, intelligent, and utterly convinced of their superiority. The Zeltharans believed that evolution favored the elegant. Their world had been kind to them, and they had risen to dominance through cooperation and careful planning. When they reached the stars and found other civilizations, they assumed that any species worth respecting would have followed a similar path. Garden worlds produced advanced species. Harsh worlds produced savages. This was the natural order of things, proven over and over again through 600 years of conquest. Vexenar had personally overseen the subjugation of 47 civilizations. He was considered one of the finest military minds in the empire. He had never lost a battle, never retreated from an engagement, never doubted the outcome of a campaign. Victory was as certain as the rising of his home-world sun. It was simply a matter of following the correct procedures and applying sufficient force. War, to the Zeltharans, was a science. Input the variables, calculate the outcomes, execute the plan. Emotion had no place in it. Now Vexenar held a data tablet in his elegant hands and read the latest survey report. A scout ship had discovered a new system at the edge of charted space. The system contained 1 yellow star and several planets. The 3rd planet from the star was inhabited by an intelligent species that called themselves humans. The planet was designated as a Class 9 Death World, the highest danger classification in Zeltharan records. Vexenar read the planetary description with clinical interest. The world, called Earth, was a nightmare of extremes. It had vast oceans of corrosive salt water covering 70% of its surface. Its crust was unstable, constantly shifting and causing earthquakes that could destroy entire cities. The atmosphere was filled with violent storms that generated winds strong enough to tear buildings apart. The temperature varied wildly depending on location and season, ranging from frozen wastelands where nothing could survive to burning deserts where the ground itself was too hot to touch. The planet was bombarded by dangerous radiation from its star. Its weather patterns were chaotic and unpredictable. It had active volcanoes that could cover the sky with ash and blot out the sun for years. It was populated by millions of species, most of which spent their time trying to eat each other. The survey officer who had compiled the report had requested a transfer to desk duty after witnessing the place. Vexenar set the tablet aside and considered the implications. A Class 9 Death World was unusual but not unprecedented. Such planets occasionally produced spacefaring species, though they were invariably primitive and easy to control. The harsh environment made them tough and aggressive, but toughness alone did not win wars against superior technology and tactics. The humans had achieved basic spaceflight and established small colonies throughout their system. They had developed primitive weapons and rudimentary faster-than-light capability. None of this concerned Vexenar in the slightest. He summoned his tactical officer, a young Zeltharan named Kyresh, and gave the order to prepare a standard subjugation fleet. 30 warships would be more than sufficient. The fleet would arrive, demonstrate overwhelming power, and demand submission. The humans would calculate their odds, realize resistance was futile, and surrender. If they were foolish enough to fight, they would be destroyed quickly and efficiently. Either way, within a standard month, the Sol system would belong to the Zeltharan Empire. Kyresh bowed and departed to carry out the orders. Vexenar returned to watching the stars. He did not think about the humans again. They were just another species on a long list, another planet to be added to the Empire's collection. This was routine. This was predictable. This was how the universe worked. What Vexenar did not know was that humanity had been watching the Zeltharan Empire for 70 years, and they had been preparing for this moment since the day they discovered they were not alone in the universe. It had started with a signal intercepted by a deep space listening station orbiting beyond Neptune. The signal was not meant for human ears. It was a routine transmission between two Zeltharan patrol ships, discussing navigation coordinates and patrol schedules. Human cryptographers had spent 3 years breaking the encryption. When they finally decoded the message, they found something else attached to it. A database of conquered species, complete with casualty figures and tactical assessments. The list was long and detailed. Each entry described a civilization that had encountered the Zeltharans and ceased to exist as an independent entity. The human government leaders who read that database understood immediately what they were looking at. They were looking at their future, unless they changed it. Humanity had faced extinction before. Ice ages had nearly wiped them out. Plagues had killed millions. Asteroids had come close to ending everything. World wars had brought them to the brink of nuclear annihilation. Each time, they had survived through a combination of luck, ingenuity, and sheer stubborn refusal to die. Now they faced a threat unlike any they had encountered before, and they responded the way humans always responded when their backs were against the wall. They got angry, and then they got to work. The preparation happened in secret. On the surface, life continued normally. People went to work, raised families, celebrated holidays, and complained about traffic. They had no idea that deep beneath their feet, in facilities carved into bedrock, their governments were building an arsenal unlike anything humanity had ever created. They had no idea that in hidden shipyards scattered throughout the asteroid belt, engineers were constructing warships designed for one purpose, to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. The humans studied everything they could learn about the Zeltharans. They intercepted thousands of communications over the decades. They learned about Zeltharan technology, tactics, psychology, and culture. They discovered the Empire's strengths and, more importantly, its weaknesses. The Zeltharans were arrogant. 600 years of unbroken victory had made them predictable. They followed the same patterns in every conquest because those patterns had always worked. They never adapted because they never needed to. They assumed that any species from a harsh world would be too primitive to pose a real threat. Humanity intended to use those assumptions against them. The humans had one critical advantage that no other species the Zeltharans had encountered possessed. They were built for war. Not just psychologically, though that was part of it. Physically, biologically, humans were designed by millions of years of evolution on a planet that never stopped trying to kill them. Their bodies were dense with muscle and bone. Their cardiovascular systems could operate under tremendous stress. Their brains could process combat situations and make split-second decisions under conditions that would incapacitate other species. Most importantly, humans could survive acceleration forces that would kill a Zeltharan instantly. The Zeltharans had evolved on a low-gravity paradise. Their bodies were delicate and elegant, designed for a gentle world. They could barely tolerate 3 times standard gravity without medical support. Anything higher would cause their organs to fail and their skeletons to collapse. Humans were different. Human pilots, with proper training and equipment, could operate at 15 times Earth gravity. For short periods, they could survive even more. This meant human ships could move in ways Zeltharan vessels could not, accelerating faster, turning harder, and reacting more quickly. The engineers designing human warships built them to take advantage of this capability. Human ships were ugly compared to the elegant curves of Zeltharan vessels. They were blocky and brutal, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. They looked like what they were, instruments of war built by a species that understood violence on a fundamental level. Inside those ships, pilots trained in centrifuge chambers that spun them until the edges of consciousness blurred. Soldiers drilled in zero gravity until they could fight in the airless void of space as naturally as they could fight on solid ground. Weapons engineers perfected systems designed to kill at ranges measured in light seconds. And through it all, humanity waited. They watched the Zeltharan Empire expand. They intercepted reports of new conquests and studied the tactics used. They built their fleet in secret, one ship at a time, hidden in places where Zeltharan scouts would never think to look. They prepared their defenses and refined their plans. They trained an entire generation of soldiers who understood that they might be humanity's last hope. When the Zeltharan survey ship finally entered the Sol system and discovered Earth, humanity was ready. The news reached Earth Command within minutes. Across the planet and throughout the solar system, alarms began to sound in facilities that had been waiting decades for this moment. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for war stopped what they were doing and went to their stations. In hidden bases on the Moon, Mars, and dozens of moons and asteroids, weapon systems powered up. In the shipyards, crews began final preparations on vessels that had never been tested in actual combat. Humanity took a collective breath and prepared for the fight of their existence. But they did not attack immediately. The plan required patience. Let the Zeltharans come. Let them see the obvious targets, the colonies and stations that humanity had deliberately left exposed. Let them believe their intelligence reports. Let them think Earth was just another primitive civilization, another easy conquest. Let them commit their forces and reveal their tactics. Let them underestimate humanity until it was too late to matter. The Zeltharan fleet arrived on schedule, emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. 30 warships, their hulls gleaming silver in the distant light of the sun. They moved through the outer system in standard formation, scanning planets and moons, cataloging targets. They detected the human colonies and stations exactly where their intelligence had predicted. They analyzed the human ships they could see and judged them primitive and inferior. They sent reports back to Vexenar confirming everything he already believed. First contact, first blood. The Zeltharan subjugation fleet approached Mars with the confidence of predators who had never met resistance they could not overcome. Commander Kyresh stood on the bridge of his cruiser and watched the red planet grow larger on his displays. According to their scans, Mars hosted 3 human colonies with a combined population of approximately 50,000. The settlements were built into canyons and beneath protective domes, vulnerable to orbital bombardment. It would be a simple matter to destroy them and demonstrate Zeltharan power to the humans on Earth. Kyresh opened a communication channel and broadcast the standard subjugation message, translated into the primitive human language. The message was simple and had been used successfully for 600 years. Submit to the Zeltharan Empire and be absorbed peacefully into our civilization. Resist and be destroyed. You have 1 standard hour to respond. The message was transmitted to all 3 colonies and to Earth itself. Then Kyresh settled back to wait. Most species chose to negotiate at this point. A few chose to fight and were eliminated. Either outcome was acceptable. The human response came not in words but in action. A small vessel emerged from behind one of Mars' moons, accelerating directly toward the Zeltharan fleet. Kyresh watched it appear on his tactical display and felt a moment of confusion followed by contempt. 1 ship against 30. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He suspected the latter. He ordered his weapons officer to destroy the approaching vessel. It would serve as a demonstration of Zeltharan power before the real subjugation began. The human ship continued its approach, and Kyresh's confusion deepened. The vessel was accelerating at a rate that should have been impossible. His sensors showed 12 times standard gravity, a force that would reduce any living crew to pulp. The ship had to be automated, a drone of some kind sacrificed to make a futile gesture. Drones were predictable. They followed programmed patterns and could be countered easily. KYRS ordered his ships to bracket the target with overlapping fire. The drone would be destroyed in seconds. The human ship opened fire first. Projectiles traveling at a significant fraction of light speed tore through space. The weapons were unlike anything in Zeltharan records. Kinetic kill vehicles guided by artificial intelligence that could predict and adapt to evasive maneuvers. Missiles that separated into dozens of smaller warheads, each one capable of independent thought. Energy shields flickered and died under the barrage. The first Zeltharan cruiser exploded before its crew understood they were in danger. KYRS screamed orders at his weapons officers. Target that ship. Full firepower. Destroy it now. His fleet responded, filling space with energy beams and explosive missiles. The human vessel moved through the storm of death like a dancer, evading fire by margins so small they seemed impossible. It accelerated, decelerated, changed vectors in ways that should have torn it apart. Whatever was piloting that ship was either suicidally reckless or operating under conditions no Zeltharan could survive. 3 more Zeltharan cruisers died in the next 2 minutes. KYRS watched his tactical display in growing horror. His ships were veteran vessels crewed by experienced officers. They had participated in dozens of subjugation campaigns. They should have overwhelmed this single attacker through sheer weight of fire. But the human ship was too fast, too maneuverable, too unpredictable. It fought with a creativity that seemed almost alive. Finally, a lucky shot struck the human vessel's engine section. The ship went dark, spinning out of control and trailing atmosphere. KYRS felt relief flood through him. It was over. They had won, though at a much higher cost than anticipated. He ordered a boarding team to secure the wreckage. He wanted to understand what kind of technology allowed such performance. He wanted to know what had piloted that ship. The boarding team entered the shattered vessel carefully, weapons ready. What they found made no sense. The pilot was still alive. The human was trapped in a heavily reinforced seat, surrounded by cushioning material designed to absorb massive impacts. He was broken and bleeding. Both his legs were shattered. Several ribs had punctured his lungs. Blood covered his flight suit. He was dying, and he knew it. But he was conscious, and he was smiling. The Zeltharan soldiers surrounded the pilot, their weapons trained on him. One activated a translation device and asked why he had attacked an entire fleet alone. Why he had thrown away his life for nothing. The human laughed, and blood bubbled from his lips. His eyes were bright with pain and something else, something fierce and wild that the Zeltharans had never seen in the eyes of a defeated enemy. That was just the outer patrol, the human said. His voice was weak but steady. You wanted first contact. Well, you got it. Now you know what you're dealing with. The pilot's smile widened. His eyes remained locked on the Zeltharan soldiers. Tell your commander something for me. Tell him we've been ready for 70 years. Tell him we know everything about you. Tell him every ship in your fleet is already a target. Tell him that Earth is not like the other worlds you've conquered. We don't surrender. We don't negotiate. We fight. The human pilot coughed, and more blood appeared. His breathing was becoming shallow. The Zeltharan medics could have saved him, but he showed no interest in their help. He looked past the soldiers to the stars visible through the torn hull. Tell your commander one more thing. This was mercy. This was us being gentle. What comes next will not be. Then his eyes closed, and he died. The Zeltharan soldiers stood in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of a ship that should never have posed a threat. They had killed the pilot, but somehow it felt like they had lost. The body was returned to Commander KYRS along with the recovered flight recorder. KYRS watched the recording of the battle and felt something cold spreading through his body. The pilot had been alone. A single human in a single ship had destroyed 4 cruisers and damaged 3 more before being stopped. And according to the pilot's final words, this had been just a patrol vessel. KYRS sent an immediate report to Supreme Commander Vexenar requesting reinforcements and a complete review of the tactical situation. The response came back within hours. Vexenar was dispatching an additional 50 warships to the Sol system. The humans were clearly more capable than initial intelligence had suggested, but they were still just one species on one planet. 80 ships would be more than sufficient to crush any resistance. The subjugation would proceed as planned. The reinforcements arrived 5 days later. The combined Zeltharan fleet now numbered 80 vessels, the largest subjugation force assembled in decades. Vexenar himself came with them, aboard the Eternal Dominion. He wanted to personally oversee the conquest of this troublesome species. He reviewed the tactical reports and watched the recording of the first engagement. The human pilot's final words troubled him, but he dismissed the concern. One lucky engagement did not change the fundamental mathematics of war. The Zeltharans had superior numbers, superior technology, and 6 centuries of experience. The humans had bravery and little else. Vexenar ordered his fleet to advance on Earth directly. No more demonstrations. No more warnings. They would approach the human homeworld, destroy any ships that opposed them, and bombard the planet until the humans surrendered or were extinct. It was time to end this. The fleet moved inward through the solar system in a formation designed to cover all approach vectors. Vexenar stood on his bridge and watched Earth grow larger on the displays. A blue and white sphere, beautiful despite being a death world. Soon it would belong to the Empire. The human response came when the Zeltharan fleet passed the orbit of Earth's moon. Space itself seemed to come alive with weapons fire. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the inner system, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They came from behind the moon, from orbital stations that had appeared civilian, from asteroid bases that had been invisible to Zeltharan sensors. They came from everywhere at once, and they were all firing. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for generations, though not in the way Vexenar expected. The human ships moved with the same impossible agility as the first vessel, accelerating and maneuvering at forces that should have been instantly lethal. They fought in coordinated groups, supporting each other with a precision that suggested constant communication and shared tactical awareness. They used weapons the Zeltharans had never encountered, projectile weapons that struck with the force of small nuclear devices, missiles that could think and adapt, energy weapons that burned through shields designed to stop anything in Zeltharan experience. The Zeltharan fleet fought back with all the power at their command. Energy beams crisscrossed space in a deadly web. Missiles filled the void. Explosions lit the darkness like brief new stars. Human ships died, torn apart by overwhelming fire. But for every human vessel destroyed, they took 2 Zeltharan ships with them. The mathematics of the battle began to shift in ways Vexenar could not accept. 3 hours into the engagement, Vexenar's tactical officer reported that they had lost 30 ships. 30. Nearly 40% of the reinforced fleet gone. Human casualties were heavy too, but they kept fighting with an intensity that seemed impossible. Ships with damaged hulls and failing systems continued to attack until they were completely destroyed. Pilots whose vessels were disabled ejected and transmitted tactical data to their comrades until the bitter end. One human fighter, its weapons exhausted and engines failing, deliberately rammed a Zeltharan destroyer at relativistic speed, the kinetic impact splitting the larger vessel in half. Vexenar watched the battle unfold and felt his certainty beginning to crack. This was not how subjugation campaigns proceeded. The inferior force was supposed to recognize its position and surrender. These humans were fighting like every battle was their last. They were trading their lives for maximum damage with a calculation that was almost mechanical in its efficiency. This was not the behavior of primitives from a harsh world. This was the behavior of a species that had planned for this exact situation. As the Earth's sun set behind the planet, casting the battlefield into shadow, Vexenar made a decision he had never made in 300 years of service. He ordered a retreat. The Zeltharan fleet withdrew to the outer system, regrouping near Jupiter. They had lost 43 ships. The humans had lost perhaps 70. By any reasonable standard, the Zelthrans had won the battle. But Vexinar knew they had lost something more important. They had lost the certainty of victory. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.